shares of the Russian state energy company Gazprom on the Moscow exchange fell by a third at once.
Putin just lost the war. Since Russia launched its war against Ukraine, both the war economy and Western sanctions have severely crippled the Russian economy. The Russian army is a large force, and financing it is no easy task. Putin has found numerous ways to circumvent sanctions in order to both fund the military and keep the Russian economy afloat. It goes without saying that oil and natural gas are the Russian economy's largest sources of revenue. While oil exports were carried out by a shadow fleet, natural gas exports continued through private companies. These companies, which supplied Europe's gas needs in particular, were meeting demand despite being subject to sanctions. However, something unexpected happened, and Putin's largest gas exporter went bankrupt. Agreements with Europe were cancelled one by one. These cancellations led to layoffs and production coming to a standstill. This also affected the army. Fuel and ammunition supplies to the front lines decreased. The Ukrainian attacks also had a major impact on this. This is because Ukraine has systematically bombed Russia's oil and natural gas facilities over the last 2 to 3 months. Russia still has customers such as China and Iran, but this is not a short-term solution. Countries such as Turkey and India are also still among the largest buyers of Russian gas. However, China, the largest buyer, is no longer showing demand for Russian gas. The decline in Russian gas has pushed the Chinese government to take measures against Russia. Putin had placed a great deal of trust in Xi Jinping, especially regarding natural gas. But after recent events, Xi Jinping decided to meet China's natural gas needs from overseas suppliers, such as Canada. The uncertainty surrounding the war in Ukraine prompted the Chinese government, with its large population, to adopt an emergency action plan. So, what was the reason that negatively affected Russian oil and natural gas sales to such an extent? From the money in people's pockets to the bullets fired on the front lines. Of course, it was the collapse of Gazprom. Is the European chapter for Russian gas truly over? Is there any chance of a comeback? Yes, the European chapter is now closed. In 2021, Russia's share of Europe's natural gas consumption was approximately 40%. Within 2 years, this picture has been reversed. In 2024, this share fell below 20%. Although there were small fluctuations in some months, the general trend is downward. The flow of gas to Europe via pipelines has fallen to near zero. On top of that, on January 1st, 2025, the last major land transit corridor via Ukraine effectively ended. Europe filled this gap with flows from Norway, global LNG, North African connections, and demand management. Storage was also used in a disciplined manner. Brussels' line is clear. The share of Russian gas will remain low. Moreover, tools to restrict Russian LNG are ready. Russia's "I'll return to Europe" card is no longer credible. This means the core of Gazprom's old business model is gone. In September 2025, Moscow announced a legally binding POS2 agreement. This sounded like a major leap forward, but the deal is hollow because the sales price was not disclosed. Without a price, there is no final investment decision, and banks will not provide long-term loans for the pipeline without a contract price. Financing must be secured before construction begins. Without financing, the project won't get off the ground. In short, the phrases "we've started politically" and "money is starting to flow into the coffers" are not the same thing. The real start of POS2 depends on the price formula being signed and the debt-equity balance being established based on that price. China is sitting strong at the table. It has alternative sources such as Central Asian pipeline gas and a broad LNG portfolio. But time is on its side, and it knows Russia's options are limited. In 2024, approximately 31 billion cubic meters of gas went to China from the POS1 line. The target is 38. This may sound like a lot, but it pales in comparison to the 150 billion cubic meters transported to Europe in 2021. POS2 could technically handle 50 billion cubic meters or more, but it still doesn't compensate for the peak volume in Europe. The real critical difference is in the margin. China's net price has historically been lower than Europe's, so even if the volume increases, profitability remains the same. That's why China's interest is not to keep Moscow alive with high prices. It's to secure long-term, reliable supply at a reasonable price. Speaking in terms of numbers, how did Gazprom get into such a mess? Two lines in the current table sum it all up. In 2023, Gazprom posted a net loss of approximately 629 billion rubles. This was one of the toughest years in the company's history. In 2024, the picture turned positive, with a net profit of approximately 1.2 trillion rubles. But a critical decision was made. No dividends. Because cash is fragile. Interest rates are high. External costs such as insurance and freight are expensive. Investments are long-term, and market visibility is low. The profit seen on paper does not elicit a sigh of relief. It reinforces the reflex to keep cash inside. This decision not only upsets shareholders, it also affects the federal budget. In Russia, oil and gas revenues still account for about 1/3 of state revenues. At the same time, defense and security spending exceeded 40% of total spending. So, if energy revenues fall, the war budget falls by the same amount. How are Ukraine's refinery and pipeline attacks draining the coffers? This is where the cheap attack, expensive defense part of the equation comes into play. Throughout 2024 to 2025, UAVs, swarm drones, and long-range munitions frequently struck refineries, pipeline pumping stations, railway fuel hubs, and port terminal areas. At times, at least 17% of operating refinery capacity was shut down. This meant gasoline shortages domestically, per-person sales limits at stations, and occasional closures. Internationally, exports were restricted or halted twice. To do a quick calculation, if 800,000 barrels per day of refinery capacity were out of service for 7 days, 5.6 million barrels would not be processed. Assuming $75 per barrel, $420 million in gross sales would be delayed or lost. If the 250,000 barrels per day flow in the southern branch of the Druzhba pipeline were to stop for 3 days, the gross flow loss would be 750,000 barrels times $75 equals $56 million. Low-cost attacks produce high-cost, cascading disruptions. Moreover, a single blow is not enough. Insurance policies are thickening, freight rates are rising, and wait times are lengthening. As a result, even if tonnage increases, net revenue per barrel is declining. Meanwhile, there is a donation campaign for Ukraine by United24 in the video description. If you want to take part in the fight for freedom, we are waiting for your support. Now let's get back to our main topic. Gazprom posted a profit in 2024, but did not distribute dividends. This has two implications. First, management considers the approaching uncertainty and investment needs more important than profit. Distributing dividends before the price of POS2 is locked in, financing is secured, and construction begins is like throwing away your umbrella when it rains. Second, the burden of internal dampers and subsidies is growing. The public treasury steps in to keep pump prices stable during refinery outages. If discounts are given externally while assistance grows internally, the budget is squeezed from two sides. Therefore, the answer to the question, there is profit, why no dividends, is not just accounting, it is strategy. Keeping the cash inside is seen as more valuable than short-term applause. So, why is the geographical and security risk of POS2 so high? POS2 is a line exceeding 2,600 kilometers. It will pass through Mongolia and cover a large area within Russia. Considering the pace of attacks on energy infrastructure over the past 2 years, this linear project is a prime target. The theoretical daily flow is roughly 137 million cubic meters. Just a 5-day interruption would mean a delay in the delivery of 685 million cubic meters. Assuming a net price of $250 per 1,000 cubic meters, this would result in a gross sales impact of $171 million. This does not include additional costs such as insurance, contract penalties, and financing. Moreover, but even before the pipeline is buried, the price is still unsigned. Banks and funds will not make an early opening under these conditions. It is not the pipeline itself, but the combination of price and security that makes it profitable. Currently, the former is absent, and the latter is expensive. How much is the European loss straining GDP and the defense budget? The collapse in sales to Europe has created a permanent contraction in foreign trade. Consider the total gas flow to Europe in 2021 at 150 billion cubic meters. By 2024, this has fallen to 52 billion cubic meters. Depending on prices, a net export loss of $20 to $30 billion per year is a reasonable estimate. Take nominal GDP at $2 trillion. This loss translates to a permanent pain in the 1 to 1.5% range. At the same time, defense security spending exceeds 40% of the total budget. Any disruption in energy cash flow directly impacts defense financing through taxes and dividends. In short, if the energy ruble sneezes, the war budget catches a cold. But is there really a risk of mass layoffs? And is the word bankruptcy realistic? The bankruptcy claim is exaggerated, but destructive dynamics are accumulating. Gazprom's direct and indirect employment has long been in the 470 to 500,000 range. If the cash flow tightens, POS2 extends, and external costs remain sticky, a gradual downsizing of the payroll becomes inevitable. Let's do a simple calculation. A 2 to 3% reduction means 10 to 15,000 people. If you take the total annual cost per person as 1.5 million rubles, expenses would decrease by 15 to 22.5 billion rubles. A 5% contraction means 25,000 people, 37.5 billion rubles. A 7 to 8% contraction means 35 to 40,000 people, 52.5 to 60 billion rubles. These are rough estimates, but they show the direction. Instead of bankruptcy, we will talk more about this. Profit without dividends, delayed investment, shrinking payroll, and low margins. This is a path that locks the company's value in the lower band, and this path is also stifling the Kremlin. Putin used the energy weapon as leverage over Europe for years. That leverage has reversed in 2 years. The EU side has systematized alternative supply, storage, and demand management. Dependence on Russian gas has permanently declined. Moscow's hope for a comeback remains politically and economically weak. At the same time, it has approached the risk of being the sole buyer in the Asian market. China buys, but at what price? The answer to this question is clear, in its favor. This is why POS2 remains on paper. Without a price lock, neither the pipeline nor the cash will flow. The statement that even China cannot save Russia is not a slogan, but a summary of the real balance on the table. China's strategic goal is not expensive Russian gas. It is cheap and secure supply. That's why it's not rushing. It's suppressing the price, shifting the financing risk to Moscow. Ukraine's strategy on the energy front is also cornering Putin. Every new blow to refineries and pipeline pumping stations triggers dozens of items simultaneously, from spare parts to automation testing. The news that the fire is out is not a solution for the economy. It is only security. The solution is a return to safe and full capacity. The longer this return takes, the greater the squeeze in the domestic market and the additional costs in the foreign market. Even as export tonnage increases, net revenue per barrel is shrinking. The damper is growing to keep prices at the pump domestically. This two-sided pressure produces a signal of unsustainability over time. This signal is heard not only in the economy, but also in military logistics. As the fuel window narrows, armored movement becomes sparse, artillery density decreases, and air defense patrols become shorter. The link between the energy front and the military front is measured in daily rhythm. The short answer to the question, is Gazprom going under, is still not today. But let's expand the question. If the ground supporting Gazprom collapses, how long can Putin hold out? That is the critical point. Europe is a permanent loss. China is driving down prices. POS2 is free. Attack cycles are expensive. Insurance and freight are sticky. Dampers are expensive domestically. There are no dividends, and payroll cuts are on the horizon. This is a picture of breathlessness. Not for a company, but for a war economy. Xi can project a political image, sign in front of cameras. But unless he raises the price of POS2 and closes the financing, that signature won't translate into cash. Xi's timeline is patient, his bargaining tough. Russia's timeline demands quick cash. Since the two timelines don't align, they say, even Xi can't save it. So, which line will prevail in the next 12 months? There are 3 possibilities. First, good but late. POS2 reaches the mid-range price. FID is issued. The construction site opens. Cash flow is positive, but margins are tight. dividends are still off the agenda. Second, China pressure. The price is locked in the low band. Volume comes in, but profitability erodes. The capex debt balance comes under stress, leading to greater payroll cuts and pressure to sell assets. Third, political premium. Initially, the price appears high, and a "we've started" photo is taken. But in the medium term, formula revisions and discounts come into play. The common thread in all three scenarios remains unchanged. POS2's transition from paper debt to cash debt is based on price and security. The price is still unknown, security is expensive. As a result, Putin's helplessness is clear. A country that has lost the European market and approached China as its sole buyer cannot set the price. While the domestic energy infrastructure is being worn down by low-cost attacks, insurance, freight, and wait days create a sticky cost abroad. As export tonnage increases, net income shrinks. Domestically, the damper grows to keep prices at the pump. The federal budget is squeezed from both sides. There are no dividends. Payroll shrinks with delays. Instead of, is Gazprom going under? The more accurate question is, how sustainable is this pace? The answer lies in the price of POS2, the speed of the attack cycle, and the closing of the damper scissors domestically. Unless all three are resolved, the picture will worsen. Gazprom's great replacement after Europe is still only on paper today. Massive losses in 2023, profits in 2024 but no dividends. Costly defense in the refinery, pipeline, port triangle in 2025. There is no salvation without the price of POS2 being tied to the signature, without insurance freight and the weight regime being relaxed, and without the damper scissors closing internally. Even Xi cannot save Putin in this state, because the issue is price. One has applause, the other has money. In today's energy chess game, the key to money is in the buyer's hands. So, what do you think about this? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.